or emotionally intelligent in the typical sense. It's something much deeper. It's a level of self-perception that penetrates beyond roles, beyond social masks, beyond even your thoughts and emotions. Jung believed that the rarest people were those who could observe the self observing itself. The departure from persona. Let's start with the idea of the persona. Jung described the persona as the mask we wear to function in society. It's how we present ourselves at work, among friends, or on social media. It's necessary to some extent, but it's also fake. People with rare personalities begin to detach from their persona early in life. Maybe they noticed that wearing the mask felt suffocating. Maybe they played the social role for years, but something in them cracked under the weight of it. These people don't just question their role as a student, mother, partner, employee. They question why they were ever expected to mold themselves into it in the first place. And here's where the rare personality begins to emerge. They see the mask and choose to take it off. This is terrifying. For most people, the mask is their identity. But the rare soul, guided by an unshakable inner compass, chooses truth over comfort. And that's the moment their true self begins to awaken. Shadow awareness and self-honesty. High self-awareness isn't just about knowing your strengths. Jung emphasized the need to acknowledge or shadow the dark, rejected parts of yourself that you deny or disown. People with rare personalities are unflinchingly honest about their flaws, desires, wounds, and even their capacity for darkness. Let's be clear, most people avoid the shadow at all costs. They project it onto others, criticize the faults they secretly possess, and distract themselves from inner reflection. But rare individuals, they walk straight into the cave. They dissect their envy. They question their pride. They investigate their insecurities. And in doing so, they reclaim parts of themselves that society told them to abandon. This level of self-awareness doesn't come from affirmation videos or self-help books. It comes from brutal introspection, from confronting uncomfortable truths, from sitting alone for hours, dissecting patterns, and refusing to lie to themselves even when it hurts. Depth over surface. Another aspect of this trait is a refusal to live on the surface. Rare individuals see through shallow interactions. Small talk exhausts them. They crave conversations about purpose, fear, love, pain, and transformation. This doesn't mean they're antisocial. It means their mind is wired for depth. They're not interested in who's dating who, what someone wore, or which influencer is trending. They're asking bigger questions. Why do people betray each other? What does forgiveness actually mean? Is there a deeper self beneath my emotions? Because of this, they often feel alienated in typical social settings, but they also attract other rare souls, people who speak the same deep symbolic language. Introspection as a daily ritual. Self-awareness isn't a one-time realization. It's a practice for rare individuals. Introspection becomes a kind of daily spiritual hygiene. They journal obsessively. They reread old entries to track their growth. They question their motives before reacting. They observe their emotional triggers without judgment. Self-awareness redirects attention. Carl Jung would argue that this level of psychological discipline is rare because most people are externally focused. They chase validation, approval, power, or security. But the rare personality redirects their attention inward. They view the inner world as not only valid but more real than the outer world. This introspection allows them to catch themselves in real time. For example, they'll notice when jealousy arises, not to suppress it, but to explore it. Where is this coming from? What part of me feels inadequate? They become their own analyst, their own therapist, their own spiritual guide. Discomfort with labels and boxes. Highly self-aware people also resist being defined by any one label. Jung warned against identifying too strongly with archetypes like the hero, the victim, the intellectual, or the caregiver. These roles, while helpful for understanding patterns, can become prisons if taken literally. Rare personalities often outgrow labels quickly. They might relate to being an empath or an INFJ or a spiritual seeker, but none of those terms define them. Why? Because they've seen how identity can become another mask, another persona, and they've learned that the true self is always evolving, always expanding. They also refuse to reduce others to a label. They listen carefully, observe deeply, and understand that every person is a multi-layered story, some parts told, some still hidden. Emotional ownership and accountability. This depth of self-awareness also translates to emotional responsibility. Rare people don't play the blame game. When something goes wrong, their first question isn't, "Who hurt me?" It's, "What can I learn from this?" They own their projections. They know when they are triggered. And instead of lashing out or ghosting someone, they step back and ask, "What part of me was touched by this moment? Why did it matter so much?" This doesn't mean they allow abuse or disrespect. They have boundaries, but they also know that every conflict is a mirror. Every emotional wound is a message from the soul, and they treat those messages like sacred scrolls meant to be decoded, not discarded. Attraction to solitude because of their attraction to solitude. Intense inner life. Rare personalities are often drawn to solitude, not loneliness solitude. There's a difference. Solitude is intentional. It's a choice. It's sacred time set aside to reconnect with the self. Jung himself often retreated into isolation to reflect, sketch mandalas, and explore his dreams. He believed that silence was necessary for soul dialogue. Rare people understand this. They don't fear being alone. In fact, they fear losing themselves in crowds, noise, and distraction. For them, solitude isn't isolation. It's integration. And while others might judge them as aloof or antisocial, they don't mind. They've learned to choose their own truth over others' opinions. Seeing the unseen. One of the most overlooked signs of a rare personality is their ability to perceive what others miss. They read between the lines. They notice the slight hesitation in your voice. They sense when something is off, when someone is hiding sadness behind a smile or anger beneath politeness. This intuitive perception comes not from magic but from an acute awareness of the self. The more you understand your own emotional layers, the more attuned you become to the layers in others. It's like their inner world has trained them to see the emotional code behind human behavior. And that's why they are often labeled as too sensitive, too intense, or too deep. But they know the truth. Those qualities are their gifts. The pain of awareness. Here's the uncomfortable truth being this. Self-aware often comes with suffering. Because when you see yourself clearly, you also see your wounds, your defenses, your patterns. You can't pretend anymore. And that's painful. Many rare, suffering individuals go through what Jung called the dark night of the soul, a period where everything familiar collapses, and they're forced to rebuild from within. But they emerge stronger, clearer, more authentic. They don't chase happiness. They pursue wholeness. And that's what makes them rare. Final note for part 1. This level of psychological depth, emotional insight, and spiritual honesty is not common, but it's the foundation upon which all the other rare personality traits are built. Carl Jung believed that the greatest act of courage is to know yourself, and then to live from that truth, no matter what. And if this sounds like you might just have one of the rarest personalities in the world. Part 2, exceptional intuition. Listening to signals from the unconscious. One of the most powerful indicators of a rare personality, according to Carl Jung, is high-functioning intuition. We're not talking about vague hunches or occasional gut feelings. This is a deep, consistent, and almost prophetic sense of knowing. It's a psychological gift rooted in Jung's theory of the 4 primary cognitive functions: thinking, feeling, sensing, and intuition. 4. Feeling, sensing, and intuition. Most people, intuition is underdeveloped or dismissed. But for those with rare personalities, Intuition is like a sixth sense, one they trust even when logic protests. Intuition has a primary mode of perception. In Jungian psychology, intuition isn't irrational. It's simply nonlinear. It gathers insights from symbols, patterns, the unconscious, and collective memory. Unlike the sensing function, which focuses on the physical present, intuition grasps the possibilities of the future, the hidden layers of reality, and the emotional undercurrents of a moment. People with rare personalities often experience the world through this lens first. They read situations with no data. They walk into a room and instantly sense the tension. They meet someone and just know something's not being said. Their inner compass picks up on signals others don't even register. Jung described this as perception through the unconscious, a way of receiving truth before it crystallizes into thought. The gift of anticipation. One of the most fascinating traits of highly intuitive people is their ability to sense what's coming. This doesn't mean they predict the future like fortune tellers. It means they can anticipate the emotional or psychological trajectory of people in situations. For example, they might know a friendship is fading long before anything goes wrong. They can feel when someone is lying not from evidence, but from energetic inconsistency. They sense opportunities and risks without needing external validation. Carl Jung believed that this type of intuitive perception comes from a strong relationship with the personal, unconscious, as well as the collective unconscious. These individuals have learned to interpret dreams, inner visions, synchronicities, and emotional resonance as data real usable information. And because they trust these signals, they often move through life with surprising clarity, even when others think they're being irrational. Symbolic thinking and pattern recognition. Intuitive types don't just see what's in front of them, they see behind it. They automatically link events, symbols, emotions, and behaviors into patterns. They make connections others miss. Where one person sees a coincidence, the intuitive sees meaning. This ability to extract meaning from the intangible is central to depth psychology. Jung himself was obsessed with alchemy, mythology, religious symbols, and archetypes. He believed these were the language of the unconscious, and intuitive people are fluent in it. They might not be able to articulate how they know something, but they feel it deeply. They may dream of water for months before realizing they're emotionally overwhelmed. They may be drawn to a specific symbol like a phoenix, a labyrinth, or a snake, and only later understand its spiritual relevance. 2. Outsiders. It looks like mysticism, but in Jungian terms, it's simply an intuitive processing style that values internal symbols over external facts. Resistance from the logical world. Unfortunately, one of the biggest challenges intuitive people face is skepticism. The modern world is obsessed with logic, evidence, and measurable results. Intuition doesn't play by those rules. It speaks softly, symbolically, and without proof. This creates a highly intuitive, lifelong tension. The rare personality trusts their inner signals, but the world demands rational explanations. And because intuition doesn't always operate on command, they can't prove their insight until much later when it's already become obvious to everyone else. This disconnect can lead to self-doubt, especially in early life. Highly intuitive people are often told they're too sensitive, overthinking, or just imagining things. But with maturity and experience, they begin to realize something profound. Their intuition has been right all along, and from that point on, they begin to trust it more than anything external. Navigating life through inner knowing. One of the clearest signs of a rare personality is their ability to make major life decisions based on intuition rather than pressure, logic, or tradition. They might turn down a job offer that looked perfect on paper but felt wrong in their gut. Leave a long-term relationship because they sensed a spiritual misalignment. Move into a city they've never visited simply because their soul was drawn there. These choices often confuse others, but rare individuals don't need others to understand. Their internal alignment is more important than external approval. Jung would say they are guided by the self, the central organizing principle of the unconscious. It's not the ego making these choices. It's something deeper, something wiser. Dream work and the subtle messages of the psyche. Another powerful aspect of intuition is how it operates through dreams. Jung dedicated much of his life to the analysis of dreams, not as random neural activity, but as direct communication from the unconscious. Rare personalities often have vivid, symbolic, and sometimes prophetic dreams. And unlike most people, they don't forget or ignore them. They study them. They feel their emotional weight. They track recurring images and ask what the psyche is trying to reveal. These individuals might dream of falling endlessly, a signal of ego collapse or spiritual surrender. Meeting a wise old man or woman, the archetype of the self, rarest. Fire or water, symbols of transformation or emotional catharsis. They understand that dreams are not entertainment. They are spiritual curriculum. Sensitivity to energetic shifts. Highly intuitive. People are also finely tuned to energetic and emotional shifts. They might get a headache when walking into a room with unresolved conflict. Suddenly feel exhausted after interacting with someone hiding anger. Sense when someone is thinking about them even across distances. This can be overwhelming. It feels like having too many open tabs in the mind, and it often leads them to seek solitude. Not out of antisocial behavior, but as a way to recalibrate their energy. Jung would say these individuals are responding to unconscious field dynamics, the invisible emotional and psychic currents between people. They don't need words to know what's happening beneath the surface. The role of synchronicity. Jung introduced the concept of synchronicity to describe meaningful coincidences that have no causal explanation. For example, thinking of someone just before they call, seeing the same symbol repeatedly, during a period of emotional transition, hearing a song lyric that perfectly answers a personal question. People with rare personalities don't dismiss these moments. They treat them like breadcrumbs on a spiritual path. 2. Them. Synchronicity isn't superstition, it's confirmation. These signs often guide their decisions, validate their emotional truths, and help them make sense of confusing end periods. They understand that the psyche and the cosmos are connected in mysterious, nonlinear ways, and they live with a quiet awe for the unseen forces shaping their lives. Intuition and the inner compass. Ultimately, what makes this intuitive sensitivity so rare is how consistently and courageously these individuals follow it. They don't use it occasionally. They build their entire life around it. They filter relationships, jobs, projects, and goals. Deep introversion. Through one question, does this feel aligned with my inner truth? And if the answer is no, they walk away. Even if it's hard, even if it costs them success or approval, they would rather walk an uncertain path in alignment with their soul than follow a predictable path that betrays it. This inner compass sharpened by intuition and self-trust becomes their greatest source of power. Part 3. Deep introversion. A vast inner world unfolds. Carl Jung didn't view introversion as mere shyness or social anxiety. In his psychological framework, introversion is a fundamental orientation of energy. And when we talk about people with extremely rare personalities, one of the most distinguishing traits is that their entire psychological orientation is inward. These individuals aren't just introverts. They are profoundly, radically, unapologetically inward-focused. They're not escaping from the world. They're exploring a reality that's richer, deeper, and more meaningful than anything they can find on the outside. Their inner life is so alive, so intricate that they sometimes forget they have a body, a myelio, or responsibilities. They are rooted in their imagination, their soul, their thoughts, and their dreams. And this makes them utterly unique in a society, obsessed with noise and stimulation. Jung's definition of introversion, an energy flow toward the inner world. According to Jung, introversion is not a behavioral preference, but a psychological orientation. Extroverts direct their energy outward toward people, events, experiences. Introverts, however, draw their energy from within. This doesn't mean they don't enjoy social interaction. It means that socializing drains them, while solitude recharges them. And the more rare the personality, the deeper this dynamic goes. These individuals aren't just a little drained after a party. They might feel spiritually unanchored, mentally overstimulated, and emotionally lost for days. Because the outer world, for them, is like walking through a storm of other people's energies, needs, expectations, and projections. So they return to the place where they feel most whole, their inner sanctuary, the richness of the inner landscape. Unlike most people who treat their inner world like a dark attic they'd rather avoid, rare introverts treat it like a cathedral. Their imagination isn't just entertainment. It's a portal. Their thoughts aren't just opinions, they're investigations. Their memories aren't just nostalgia. They're coded symbols, carrying messages from the unconscious. They think in layers. They feel in archetypes. They remember conversations from 10 years ago and still analyze what wasn't said. They reflect on symbols, poetry, imagery, and dreams, not because they're romantic or dramatic, but because these things speak to the deeper truth of human experience. They could spend hours alone and not feel bored for a second. In fact, some of their most exciting adventures happen when their eyes are closed and their mind is wide open. Solitude is sacred, not optional. To most people, solitude is something they tolerate when there's no one around. To the rare introvert, solitude is the main event. They crave it. They guard it. They design their life around it. It's during solitude that they connect with their unconscious through meditation, reflection, or journaling. Social fatigue. Process complex emotions that don't make sense in real time. Recalibrate their energy after dealing with too much sensory or emotional input. Dream, create, and plan their future in symbolic nonlinear ways. If denied solitude for too long, they start to lose clarity, emotional balance, and even spiritual alignment. Jung described this as the psyche's need to return to the center. And for these individuals, that center lies within social fatigue versus social anxiety. It's important to distinguish introverted depth from social phobia or anxiety. Rare personalities are not necessarily afraid of people. In fact, they often have exceptional social intelligence. They just don't thrive in constant interaction. They're the ones who can hold space for a deep, one-on-one conversation for hours, but completely shut down in a noisy group of 10. They can speak with warmth and charisma at a gathering, but feel empty afterward. This is because their psychological energy is finite and they must spend it wisely. And while making the mind is a labyrinth, others might interpret this withdrawal as rejection or aloofness. The truth is they're preserving their inner light. They understand that every social interaction is a transaction of energy, and not every transaction is worth making. The mind is a labyrinth. Rare introverts don't have simple thoughts. Their minds are like labyrinths with secret passageways, hidden doors, and underground rivers of insight. A single question like, "Why did I react that way?" can send them down a spiral of inquiry that lasts days. They don't just wonder if they're angry. They ask, is this anger covering fear? Is this fear rooted in childhood rejection? Am I projecting my unmet need for validation onto this situation? What part of my shadow is trying to be seen here? This kind of internal interrogation isn't exhausting. It's empowering. It's showing. It's how they evolve. It's how they stay aligned with their truth. And it's how they develop the kind of emotional and spiritual intelligence that's impossible to fake. The disconnection from mainstream culture because of their internal orientation. These individuals often feel disconnected from mainstream culture. They don't understand the obsession with superficial success, constant validation, or the need to be on all the time. They may struggle with small talk, dating apps, corporate networking, events, or social media. It's not that they're antisocial. It's that the content of these interactions doesn't match the frequency of their soul. They want to talk about fear, purpose, childhood wounds, synchronicity, the meaning of love, not celebrity gossip or weekend plans. This disconnect often, the hermit archetype, leads them to retreat from the herd not out of bitterness but out of necessity. Because when they try to fit into the mainstream, they feel spiritually malnourished. And so they choose authenticity over acceptance, even if that means walking alone. The archetype of the hermit. In Jungian terms, rare introverts often embody the hermit archetype. The hermit isn't lonely or weak. He's wise. He retreats to the mountains not to escape life, but to understand it. He carries a lantern lighting the way for others when they lose sight of their own truth. Rare individuals too often end up as guides, healers, thinkers, or teachers, even if they never intended to. Their time in solitude gives them insight that the world desperately needs. But they only share it when they feel called, never for attention or applause. Jung believed that embracing the hermit within is essential for spiritual maturation. It's how we listen to the self, how we reconnect with the unconscious, and how we reclaim the parts of us that society has buried. Intimacy over popularity. Because their inner world is so alive, rare introverts don't need tons of relationships to feel fulfilled. What they crave is depth, real intimacy, emotional nakedness. They might have only a few close friends or a small chosen family. But within those connections, they go Allen. They are fiercely loyal, deeply empathetic, and emotionally available in a way that feels rare in today's distracted world. Being misunderstood. But they also don't force connection. They let it happen organically because they know true intimacy can't be manufactured. It must be revealed. And they will wait for that kind of bond, even if it takes years. Being misunderstood and accepting it. One of the hardest parts of being deeply introverted, rare personality, is being misunderstood. People might label them quiet, weird, too intense, disconnected, emotionally distant. But these labels reveal more about the speaker's discomfort than the introvert's truth. Eventually, rare individuals learn that being misunderstood is part of the path. They don't need the world to get them. They need to get themselves. And once that happens, the loneliness of the journey becomes a sacred solitude, a space for transformation, for creation, for integration, for grace. Part 4, Deep Empathy, Emotions as a Tool for Higher Perception. One of the most distinctive and rarest traits found in the individuals Carl Jung would classify as possessing an extremely rare personality is their capacity for deep empathy. This isn't simply being kind or feeling bad for someone that's surface-level compassion. What we're talking about here and radical emotional resonance, an almost mystical ability to absorb and process the emotional energy of others as if it were their own. In Jung's psychology, emotions are not random reactions. They are psychic events, messengers from the unconscious, signals of alignment or disintegration, warnings and invitations to awareness for deeply empathetic individuals. Emotions are not distractions from thought. They are a form of intelligence in their own right. These people don't. Emotional intelligence merely feel for others. They feel through others. And in a society that values logic over emotional intelligence, this ability is both a superpower and a profound burden. Jung and emotional function as a path to individuation. In Jung's framework, the feeling function is one of the 4 primary ways the psyche processes information. But unlike thinking, which relies on logic and structure, feeling evaluates based on value and meaning. It asks, Does this resonate with my soul? Does this situation have emotional integrity? In people with extremely rare personalities, the feeling function is often dominant or highly developed. But here's the twist. It's not about being moody or emotionally reactive. It's about using emotion as a fine-tuned barometer for truth. When something feels off, these individuals listen. When a person's words don't match their energy, they notice. When a relationship drains them, they don't wait for proof. They trust the emotional signal and investigate. And through this function, they're often led to profound personal revelations, shadow work, healing, and transformation, not only for themselves, but for others as well. Empathy as absorption, feeling what others cannot express. Empathy for these individuals is not about putting themselves in someone's shoes. It's about wearing those shoes without trying, without even meaning to. They don't need to be told that someone is in pain. They feel it in their own body. They sense sadness behind a smile, anger beneath stillness, and fear in silence. This can be incredibly disorienting, especially in environments where people hide their feelings. Because the rare empath doesn't just hear the words, they perceive the frequency beneath them. Imagine sitting in a meeting and feeling nauseous because someone across the table is secretly anxious. Imagine hugging a friend and feeling grief that they haven't even admitted to themselves. Imagine watching someone laugh and sensing that it's a survival mechanism, not joy. This is everyday life for deeply empathetic individuals. They're emotional sponges, and without boundaries, they can drown in other people's unresolved energy. The shadow of empathy, emotional overwhelm, and psychic fatigue. Jung often warned of the unconscious identification with others as a form of projection. For rare empaths, the risk isn't just absorbing feelings. It's losing their identity within someone else's emotional field. When boundaries are unclear, empathy becomes intimate. They might feel guilty for setting limits, stay in toxic relationships out of understanding, confuse another person's sadness with their own, take responsibility for others' emotional well-being. This leads to psychic fatigue, burnout, and spiritual dissociation. Jung would call this a failure to individuate, becoming trapped in the other psychic system, rather than returning to one's own. The key for rare empaths is to practice what Jung called differentiation, the conscious separation between the self and the other. They must learn that feeling someone's pain doesn't mean they must carry it. Boundaries aren't betrayal. They're the foundation of mature empathy. Emotion as a lens for truth. Rare personalities don't view emotion as noise to be silenced. They understand it as a diagnostic tool, a sacred language that reveals what the rational mind cannot. They ask why. Emotional analysis. Does this interaction drain me? What is my anxiety trying to show me? Is this joy mine, or am I feeling someone else's relief? What unconscious wound is being activated in this conflict? They know that emotions are symbolic. Sadness isn't always about the present. It can be a remnant from childhood. Anger may not be about the situation. It could be about unspoken boundaries. Fear may not be about danger. It might be the ego resisting transformation. This kind of emotional analysis is rare because most people dismiss their emotions or label them as irrational. But the rare empath listens carefully, knowing that every emotion is a message from the unconscious self, the language of subtlety. These individuals don't just speak the language of emotion, they live in it. They communicate in nuances, a pause, a seam, a glance. They pick up what's unsaid more than what's said. And because of this, they often feel out of place in environments that reward boldness, speed, and surface-level charm. They don't perform emotions. They embody them. They don't manipulate with charisma. They connect through resonance. Sometimes this makes others uncomfortable. They are too honest, too intense, too sensitive. But these are the very qualities that make them healers, artists, visionaries, and mystics. They are the people others turn to when the mask falls off, when the crisis hits, when the illusion dies. Because even though they may walk quietly, they hold space for emotional truths that others are too afraid to face. Trauma sensitivity and emotional memory. Many rare empaths carry emotional memories in their bodies, not just their own, but inherited ones. They may react strongly to injustice, cruelty, or betrayal even when it's not directed at them. They feel it as if it were theirs. This is why they often become counselors, artists, or emotional memory advocates. They have an emotional memory for the collective, not just the personal. They are sensitive to generational trauma, social pain, and ancestral patterns. Jung's idea of the collective unconscious plays out vividly here. These individuals don't just empathize with people, they empathize with humanity. And that level of feeling requires incredible emotional resilience, empathy, and archetypal wounding. Many rare empaths carry what Jung might call an archetypal wound, a deep psychological scar that reflects not just personal history, but mythological suffering. Think of the wounded healer, Kieran, the orphan, the outcast, the martyr. They resonate with these patterns sometimes before they even understand why. Their life often mirrors these myths: abandonment, betrayal, sacrifice, exile. Not because they're doomed, but because these experiences open the soul. And once they begin to understand their wounding not as weakness, but as initiation, everything changes. Their empathy becomes refined. Their sensitivity becomes discernment. Their emotions become wisdom. They no longer feel broken. They feel chosen not by society, but by the soul itself. The empath is mirror. One of the most subtle but potent qualities of rare empaths is their ability to act as mirrors. When someone sits with them, they feel seen not just for who they pretend to be, but for who they are beneath the layers. This can be terrifying for people who aren't ready. The empath doesn't need to call you out. They simply reflect back your truth, and that reflection can be healing, disarming, or even enraging. Emotional alchemy. Jung called this the activation of shadow. When our hidden self is exposed through relationship, empaths unknowingly trigger this process just by being present. And that's why some people are drawn to them while others flee. It's not about the empath being too much. It's about them being too real. In a world addicted to denial. Emotional alchemy. Ultimately, what makes this depth of empathy so rare is not just the feeling itself. It's what they do with it. They transmute pain into art. They turn sorrow into wisdom. They transform heartbreak into compassion. They are emotional alchemists, not because they've escaped suffering, but because they've danced with it, listened to it, and integrated it into the wholeness of their being. And in doing so, they don't just feel the world, they heal it. Part 5, symbolic thinking, communicating with the unconscious through art, dreams, and metaphor. One of the most mystifying yet profound traits of individuals with extremely rare personalities is their innate ability to think symbolically. For them, nothing is just what it seems. A tree is not just a tree. It's growth, rootedness, and ancestral memory. A broken mirror isn't just shattered glass. It's the fragmentation of identity. A snake in a dream isn't just fear. It might be transformation, rebirth, or the emergence of shadow. Carl Jung believed that symbols are the language of the unconscious, and rare individuals, particularly those on the path of individuation, are fluent in this language. They don't think in facts alone. They think in metaphors, archetypes, patterns, and sacred imagery. This symbolic mind is what gives their personality its uncommon texture, depth, and mystery. Jung in the language of symbols. According to Jung, the unconscious doesn't speak English or German or any other human tongue. It communicates through symbolic images that express truths too complex for rational thought. These symbols often appear in dreams, spontaneous fantasies, slips of the tongue, artwork, or even bodily sensations. The rare personality doesn't dismiss these moments. They lean into them. They, symbolic emotion, feel the gravity of a dream that doesn't make sense. They notice a recurring image in their meditations. They see the synchronicity between a piece of art and an unresolved emotion. And rather than write it off, they decode it like a psychic archaeologist unearthing a hidden relic. They know that symbols bypass the ego and speak directly to the psyche. Symbolic emotion, seeing meaning in everything. Symbolic thinkers live in a world of laid meanings. They might see a crow and feel it's a warning or message from the ancestral realm. Hear a song lyric and know it's an answer to an internal question they never voiced aloud. Notice a child drawing a spiral and feel the universe pulling them back to a forgotten truth, while others move through life focused only on what is measurable. These individuals are paying attention to what is mythic. They don't just witness life. They interpret it, like poets or mystics, translating events into the deeper language of the soul. This can be exhausting. Not everyone around them understands. Many accuse them of reading too much into things. But the rare personality knows nothing is random when the unconscious is involved. Everything is data. Every interaction is a mirror. Every moment is a message. If you're listening, the role of dreams in symbolic thinking. Dreams are vital. Portal for the rare. Symbolic thinker Jung called dreams the royal road to the unconscious, and these individuals travel that road often, sometimes nightly. But unlike ordinary dreamers who forget their dreams or treat them as nonsense, symbolic minds study them. They record their dreams. They trace their dream themes across months or years. They notice when a symbol repeats: a forest, a child, a flood, a locked door. They don't ask, "What does this dream mean?" In a surface way, they ask, "What is this symbol trying to show me? What part of my psyche created this image? And why now? How does this dream relate to my waking life's emotional landscape?" Jung believed that every dream is a self-portrait in symbolic form. Rare individuals take this seriously. They don't just analyze dreams. They live by their guidance. A. Archetypes. Dream of drowning that may tell them to confront repressed grief. A dream of flight may signal liberation from old identity. A dream of being chased could indicate a part of the shadow they've yet to integrate. This inner myth-making becomes a sacred dialogue between their conscious self and the vast unconscious beneath. Archetypal sensitivity. Symbolic thinkers also have a high sensitivity to archetypes, universal symbols that live in the collective unconscious. These are not personal stories, but mythic energies that shape human experience across cultures and time. Common archetypes include the hero, representing strength and transformation, the shadow, representing the denied or repressed self, the animus, representing inner feminine or masculine energy, the wise old man-woman, representing intuition and guidance, the trickster, representing disruption and necessary chaos. Rare individuals unconsciously inhabit these archetypes in different stages of their life. They might go through a hero's journey in their 20s, battle the shadow in their 30s, and integrate in their 40s. They don't just read about mythology, they embody it. Jung believed that when we recognize the archetype we're living out, we become empowered. Instead of being swept away by unconscious forces, we collaborate with them. And rare individuals with their symbolic minds do this naturally. They don't ask, "Why is this happening to me?" They ask, "What story am I inside of right now? And who am I being asked to become?" Art as psychological expression. For the symbolic mind, art is not optional. It is essential, not necessarily for public consumption, but for inner revelation. They may paint abstract images to process trauma, write poems that help them decode grief, create music, sculptures, or collages that express what words cannot, even use tarot, mandalas, or mythology as tools for psychological inquiry. Jung himself painted mandalas daily during times of inner turmoil. He saw them as psychic diagrams, a way for the self to reveal itself to the ego. Rare individuals do the same, whether through literal mandalas or metaphorical ones. Their art is not about aesthetics. It's about soul excavation. They create because their inner world is too rich, too chaotic, too alive to remain unexpressed. Symbolism and language and communication. Even in conversation, symbolic thinkers reveal their uniqueness. They speak in metaphors, analogies, in vivid imagery. They don't say I'm overwhelmed. They say it feels like a tidal wave is swallowing my lungs. They don't say I'm hopeful. They say there's a flicker at the bottom of the cave. Their language isn't poetic for the sake of beauty. It's symbolic, because that's how they think. Literal descriptions feel inadequate. Symbols carry more meaning, more truth, more emotional weight. And because of this, others may find them mesmerizing or utterly confusing. But those who get it will feel as though they're listening to someone from another dimension. Because in a sense, they're the struggle in a literal world. The greatest challenge for symbolic minds is living in a literal world. A world obsessed with black and white answers, scientific metrics, and surface-level thinking. A world that distrusts the irrational, the mysterious, the dreamlike. These individuals often feel misunderstood by peers who want the facts isolated in relationships where their emotional language is dismissed, frustrated by education systems that reward memorization over imagination. But they also know this. Their mind is a bridge between worlds. They are the ones who write myths, interpret visions, speak in archetypes, and awaken others to deeper meaning. They may never be mainstream, but their very existence keeps the world from going completely numb. Symbolic living as spiritual practice. For rare individuals, symbolism isn't a style. It's a spiritual practice. They live by questions like, what is this season of my life trying to teach me? What archetype am I being asked to embody? What inner god or goddess needs to awaken right now? What story must I rewrite to reclaim my soul? Every decision is filtered through this lens. Every loss becomes myth. Every relationship becomes sacred contract. Every breakdown becomes transformation. They don't need religion to be spiritual. They are inherently spiritual because they live in constant dialogue with the symbolic world. And that's what makes them so rare. Part 6, Radical Self-Analysis. The unending quest for inner transformation. If there is one trait that truly separates rare personalities from the rest, it's their relentless, almost compulsive drive towards self-examination and spiritual transformation. These individuals don't just reflect occasionally. They live in a state of near constant self-analysis, driven not by insecurity, but by an unshakable desire to evolve. Carl Jung believed that the process of individuation, the integration of all self-analysis aspects of the self into a cohesive whole, was the most important work a person could do in their lifetime. 4. The rare personality. This process is not abstract theory. It's daily reality. They are constantly examining the interplay between their thoughts, emotions, instincts, beliefs, and behaviors, not to perfect themselves, but to become whole. Self-analysis as a spiritual imperative. To the average person, self-reflection is something you do after making a mistake or before a big decision. But for the rare personality, self-analysis is like breathing. It's woven into every moment, every interaction, every emotional reaction. They're always asking, why did I respond that way? What did that comment trigger in me? Is this pattern mine or something I inherited? What does this pain want me to see? They don't fear what they'll find in the dark corners of their psyche. In fact, they're drawn to it because to them, every uncomfortable truth, every buried emotion, every irrational fear is a doorway, an invitation to deeper self, understanding, and liberation. This isn't self-obsession. It's self-responsibility. It's a refusal to live on autopilot. The practice of shadow work. Jungian psychology hinges on the concept of shadow. the unconscious parts of ourselves that we deny, repress, or disown. For most people, the shadow is projected onto others, but rare individuals are deeply committed to reclaiming it. They practice what Jung called shadow work, the process of consciously engaging with the parts of the psyche that feel shameful, unacceptable, or frightening. They ask, what do I judge in others that I refuse to see in myself? Where am I pretending to be good when I'm really afraid? What part of me is manipulative, even if I won't admit it? This level of honesty is brutal. It requires emotional courage that most people don't have. But rare individuals would rather be broken open than stay asleep. They know that the shadow, when integrated, becomes power, untapped potential, creative fire, authenticity. They don't want to be seen as good. They want to be real. Journaling, tracking, and inner dialogue. These individuals often engage in intense practices of introspection. They journal not to vent, but to decode. They keep track of dreams, triggers, breakthroughs, and behavioral loops. They engage in internal dialogue, sometimes even writing letters to different parts of their psyche. The inner child, the shadow, the inner critic, the wounded protector. They have internal dialogue, entire conversations with themselves that might look mad from the outside, but inside these dialogues are how they create internal coherence. It's how they listen to the whispers of the unconscious, how they integrate the fragmented self into wholeness. Jung believed that the psyche is composed of multiple subpersonalities or complexes. Rare personalities are aware of this and actively communicate with these inner figures. They don't suppress inner conflict. They moderate it like a wise elder guiding a village of inner parts. Crisis as catalyst for the rare personality. Crisis is not an enemy. It's a catalyst. When their life falls apart, when relationships collapse, when they lose everything that wants to find them, they don't run, they descend. They know that destruction often precedes rebirth. That psychological breakdown is often a spiritual breakthrough in disguise. So, while others ask, how can I stop the pain? The rare soul asks, what is this pain trying to transform in me? They don't just survive suffering, they alchemize it. Jung described this as a confrontation with the self, the deepest part of the psyche, often revealed through suffering. Rare individuals walk straight into the fire of ego death because they know it's the only way to uncover the gold beneath the ash. The wounded healer archetype. Many rare individuals embody the wounded healer archetype, first described by Jung through the figure of Chiron from Greek mythology. These are people who have endured profound emotional or spiritual wounds and, through the process of healing themselves, become capable of healing others. Their wound doesn't disqualify them, it qualifies them. It gives them depth, compassion, and insight that no degree or certification ever could. And because they've been through the darkness, they can sit with others in pain without flinching. They don't rush to fix. They don't minimize. They hold space with calm, knowing the soul is doing sacred work even in the chaos. This is not martyrdom. It's mastery, a kind of quiet power that only comes from having walked through hell with your eyes wide open. Spiritual accountability. Rare individuals don't just look at their behavior. They examine their motives, their unconscious agreements, and their spiritual alignment. They ask, am I acting out of fear or love? Is this desire coming from my soul or my wound? Am I manipulating reality to avoid transformation? They are accountable to their higher self, not their ego. This means they often say no to things that look good on the surface, but feel misaligned beneath. They turn down relationships, opportunities, and comforts if those things would compromise their integrity or distract them from their inner work. This level of spiritual discipline is rare because it requires the courage to disappoint others in order to remain loyal to your soul. The mirror of relationships. Self-analysis doesn't end when they're alone. Rare individuals view every relationship as a mirror of their unconscious. Every conflict, every attraction, every trigger becomes a chance to investigate. Instead of blaming their partner, friend, or parent, they ask, what part of me is being revealed here? Am I projecting something unresolved onto this person? What shadow is being activated by their behavior? This is not about self-blame. It's about radical ownership. It's understanding that while others may hurt us, we are still responsible for how we interpret, internalize, and respond. This mindset leads to faster growth, deeper healing, and the dismantling of old victim narratives that keep the soul small. The never-ending journey. The rare personality understands that there is no final destination in self-work, no point at which they're done. Growth is infinite. The psyche is a living, evolving organism. The soul is an unfolding mystery. So they keep going. They keep questioning, digging, healing, releasing, integrating, not because they're broken, but because they're becoming. And in this lifelong process, inner freedom of self-examination, they find what so many people never do, inner freedom. They are not controlled by their past, their pain, or their projections. They are not asleep inside a socially conditioned identity. They are awake, aware, and aligned even when it hurts, especially when it hurts, because they know the more honestly they face themselves, the more of their soul they get to reclaim. Part 7. Nonconformity, refusing to fit into society's mold. There's a defining moment in the life of every rare personality when they realize they just don't fit in. Not because they're broken, not because they're rebellious, but because their inner truth simply cannot bend to the demands of a world obsessed with conformity, performance, and predictability. Carl Jung often warned of the dangers of over-identifying with the collective. He believed that blindly adopting the roles, beliefs, and expectations of society was one of the most effective ways to kill the soul. The rare personality, whether consciously or unconsciously, rejects this fate. They do not conform. They individuate. And in a world designed to mass-produce identities, their refusal to blend in is not a weakness. It's a sacred act of defiance. The rejection of persona. Jung coined the term persona to describe the social mask we wear to navigate the outer world. It's the role we play to be liked, accepted, and approved of. But the rare personality knows that the persona is not the self, and they refuse to become imprisoned by it. This might mean leaving a prestigious job that feeds the ego but starves the soul, rejecting marriage or parenthood if it doesn't align with their inner truth, saying no to social events that feel performative or draining, dressing, speaking, or creating in ways that challenge social norms. They aren't trying to be different. They're trying to be real, and that authenticity often looks like rebellion to a culture rooted in illusion. The pain of not belonging. Nonconformity isn't easy. It comes with pain, often a deep primal ache of not belonging. Rare individuals may go years feeling like outsiders, black sheep, or aliens in their own families. They're often the ones who were too sensitive, too intense, or too weird from a young age. They watch others play the game of life, fitting in, climbing ladders, following scripts, and wonder if something is wrong with them for not being able to follow suit. But eventually, they realize it's not that they're flawed. It's that their soul refuses to be domesticated. This pain becomes a kind of fire, a crucible that burns away the need for external validation. They stop chasing acceptance and start chasing truth. And in that shift, they begin to find their power, the courage to be unpopular. Rare individuals often develop what Jung might call a positive shadow qualities that are admirable but socially threatening. This includes authenticity, clarity, independence, and deep empathy, traits that are deeply needed but rarely celebrated. And because of this, they're often misunderstood, judged, rejected. They may be labeled as difficult for asking real questions, resented for their refusal to gossip or play politics, viewed as arrogant because they follow their own path, misread as cold or aloof because they don't engage in surface-level pleasantries. But they know something most people don't. Being liked is not the same as being aligned, and they would rather lose approval than lose themselves. This takes immense courage, especially in a world where entire industries are built on attention, followers, and likability. The rare personality chooses integrity over applause every time. Deconstructing cultural narratives. Another aspect of their nonconformity is their tendency to deconstruct the narratives they've been taught. They question everything: the definition of success, the meaning of love, the structure of education, the ethics of capitalism, the stories about gender, race, power, and progress. They don't reject these narratives blindly. They interrogate them. They ask, who created this system? Who benefits from it? Who is excluded? What does my soul say about this beyond what I've been told? They refuse to inherit belief systems without scrutiny, and that refusal makes them both dangerous and sacred. They're the ones who birth new paradigms, new ways of seeing, new stories for a world in transition, living from the inside out. While most people live from the outside and shaping themselves to fit what society wants, rare individuals live from the inside out. They allow their internal values, intuitions, and soul directives to shape their external life. This might look unconventional from the outside: a career path that zigzags unpredictably, a love life that doesn't follow traditional timelines, a lifestyle that prioritizes meaning over money. But to them, this path is not erratic. It's aligned. It reflects who they really are, not who they were conditioned to be. They're not waiting for permission to be themselves. They already are. And that authenticity draws others toward them, not always with praise, but often with awe. Because in a world of curated personas, authenticity is magnetic. The battle with internalized conditioning. It's important to note nonconformity isn't always easy, even for rare personalities. Most have internalized some of society's expectations. They too wrestle with voices that say, you should be more successful by now. You need to settle down. You're wasting your potential. Why can't you just be normal? These voices are echoes of collective conditioning, and rare individuals do the work of unlearning them. They return again and again to their own center. They remember that freedom is not about escaping the world. It's about reclaiming your right to choose your truth, even when it costs you comfort, praise, or approval. And with every step toward inner alignment, they shed another layer of inherited identity, sacred contradictions. Rare personalities are also walking contradictions, and they don't apologize for it. They can be deeply spiritual, but not religious. They can be kind yet firm, gentle yet fierce, wise yet childlike, compassionate yet boundaried. They hold space for a paradox because they know the soul isn't linear, the psyche is complex, and truth often lives in the tension between opposites. Carl Jung called this the union of opposites, the reconciliation of conflicting forces within the self, and rare individuals, by embracing their contradictions, become whole in a way that others only glimpse in moments. The nonconformist as a channel for change. Ultimately, nonconformity is not just rebellion for its own sake. It's a vessel for transformation. Rare individuals are the ones who say what others are too afraid to say. Break cycles in their families. Walk away from systems that no longer serve the soul. Create new models of leadership, love, and liberation. They don't fit in because they're not meant to. They're here to reshape the very structures they were born into. And the cost of that role is high, but the payoff, freedom, authenticity, and a life that actually feels like theirs. Part 8, to calling beyond the ordinary, living out a soul-level destiny. Among all the signs of an extremely rare personality, perhaps the most defining is this. They feel they were born for something greater than themselves. not in an arrogant, attention-seeking way, but in a quiet, unwavering sense that their life is not random, that their pain, their gifts, their insights, their struggles, all of it is part of a sacred trajectory. Carl Jung referred to this as the archetype of destiny, the psychological pull toward wholeness, meaning and fulfillment that transcends the ego. For rare individuals, this inner calling is more than ambition. It's a spiritual obligation, a sense that they must serve something higher, even if they don't yet have the words for it. This calling doesn't make life easier. In fact, it often makes it harder because it requires sacrifice, isolation, transformation, and relentless self-honesty. But rare personalities know deep down if they don't follow this path, they will never feel truly alive. The inner voice that won't go away. The calling doesn't always shout. Often it whispers, but it's persistent. It might start as a vague restlessness in the middle of success, a feeling that there has to be more than this, a pull toward creativity, healing, or truth-telling that defies logic, a dream that keeps repeating, a strange emotional weight when witnessing injustice or suffering. Rare individuals don't brush this off. They listen, they investigate, and eventually they realize this isn't some random urge. It's a soul assignment. Jung would say that the self, the organizing principle of the psyche, is calling them toward individuation through a life of purpose and ignoring. It leads not to peace but to psychic suffering, a life marked by initiation. Rare personalities often experience life in distinct initiatory phases. These are not just changes in circumstance. They are transformational ruptures that reshape their identity. These phases may include the dark night of the soul where everything false is stripped away. Ego, death, collapse of old identities, roles, or ambitions. Awakening sudden disruptive insight into the deeper layers of existence. Integration, learning how to live in alignment with this new truth. These initiations aren't always mystical. Sometimes they come through heartbreak, loss, betrayal, or illness. But whatever the form, they mark a before and after in the rare individual's life. And with each cycle, they grow more sensitive, more attuned, and more devoted to their calling. The call is not always glorious. Many people fantasize about purpose as something grand, being famous, changing the world, saving lives. But rare individuals know that the call often asks for invisible labor, holding space for someone's breakdown, without needing credit, creating art that few understand but many feel, breaking family cycles quietly with no applause, being a lighthouse for others, while navigating your own storms. Jung said that the self doesn't care about the ego's desire for recognition. It cares about transformation. And often the most soul-aligned lives are the least understood by the world. The rare personality embraces this. They don't need their purpose to be loud. They just need it to be true. The role of synchronicity. Synchronicities, meaningful coincidences, are often how the rare personality receives confirmation that they are on the right path. They might see the same number, symbol, or phrase repeatedly. Meet someone who echoes their internal question. Find that a song, book, or image answers an unspoken longing. Witness events aligning in ways they couldn't plan. These signs feel like cosmic winks, the universe reminding them, you are not crazy. You are being guided. Jung believed that synchronicities occur when the inner world and outer world align around purpose. For the rare individual, they are sacred breadcrumbs, gently nudging them forward on the path. Deep responsibility without external pressure. What's striking about the rare personality's sense of purpose is that it doesn't come from pressure. It's not about proving themselves to parents, society, or peers. It comes from an internal moral compass, a feeling that they have a duty to become who they were created to be. They know that playing small helps no one, that betraying their truth creates internal rot, that ignoring the soul's whisper leads to spiritual illness. So they step forward, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes fearfully, but always intentionally. They may not know the whole path, but they trust the next step. And with each courageous choice, they align more with the blueprint of their soul. Isolation is preparation. The rare personality often walks through long periods of isolation, times when their purpose seems unclear. Their relationships fall away and their vision feels distant. This isn't punishment, it's preparation. Jung spoke often of the need to withdraw in order to grow. Just as the alchemist must work in solitude, just as seeds grows underground, just as the caterpillar dissolves in its cocoon, the rare individual must sometimes disappear from the world in order to re-emerge transformed. These silent seasons refine them, strip away distraction, clarify. Their calling, build inner strength, and when the time comes, they emerge not just wiser, but anchored in something unshakable. The tension between the human and the divine. Living with a soul-level calling creates a constant tension between the human self with its fears, flaws, and doubts, and the divine impulse that demands risk, vulnerability, and expansion. Rare individuals live in this paradox daily. They know they are not perfect, but they also know they're being asked to carry something sacred, to speak, create, or live in a way that awakens others, to embody truths that are ancient, universal, and needed. And this responsibility humbles them. It softens their ego. It sharpens their discernment because they know this isn't about them. It's about the work they were sent to do. The invisible impact. Here's what most people miss. Rare personalities may never be celebrated. They may not trend. They may not be quoted. They may not go viral. But they change the world by helping one person heal, creating one piece of art that saves a life, asking one question that sparks an awakening, holding one moment of sacred silence in a world addicted to noise. They don't measure their impact in likes, money, or status. They measure it in alignment. Did they speak truth? Did they live honestly? Did they love fully? Did they stay loyal to the self? If the answer is yes, they've succeeded whether the world ever notices or not. A life of meaning, not perfection. In the end, what sets rare personalities apart isn't that they're flawless. It's that they're devoted to growth, to honesty, to soul, to something greater than themselves. They live with grief, doubt, failure, and pain just like everyone else. But they also live with meaning, with awe, with a fire inside that refuses to die. They are not better. They are not chosen. But they have chosen to listen. And that choice changes everything. You weren't meant to fit in. You were meant to awaken. If even one of these signs spoke to your soul, it's because your path is rare, sacred, and desperately needed in a world asleep to truth. So don't apologize for who you are. Own it. And if this message resonates, share it. Someone else out there might need to remember who they really are.